Are you living in a virtual reality? Stay tuned as we interview physicist and author Tom Campbell. Welcome to Shift Happens, a show about the positive shifts going on in people's lives and communities. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Anna.
And welcome to the fourth and final segment of our interview with Tom Campbell.
In the first, second, and third segments, we talked about our world being a virtual reality and the implications in that for how we live our lives and navigate challenges. We also talked about the evolution of consciousness and our chances for getting through this next little while successfully.
In this segment, we talk about Tom's upcoming experiments and what he hopes will be the outcome if he successfully proves his theories to the conventional physicists. How do you see your experiments that you're working on? I mean, we have to do a plug for what you're doing right now, your experiments. How do you see those experiments benefiting conversations, encouraging conversations like we're having right now?
Okay, I think there's a very strong link. That's part of the reason why I created the conversations. These experiments that I've put out there, there's about 17 of them. That's a lot of experiments. They are going to kind of help push, and I hate to use the word force, they're not really going to force, but they're going to make it harder for the physicists, for the scientists to think about this as a materialistic reality. Okay, if it's not a materialistic reality, then what is it? Well, the only thing that fits, that can actually explain the experiments, is that this is a virtual reality. If it's a virtual reality, simple logic will tell you that it's a subset of something bigger, and that bigger thing is non-physical. Boom. That's a really big idea to float out in front of people, that this reality, our universe, is a subset of something bigger, more fundamental, that's non-physical. It's a really big thought. Now, if you just say that, if you and I get up and we get big loudspeakers and we say that so everybody in the world hears it, it probably wouldn't make much of a difference. But if the scientists say that, and I call the scientists the high priests of Western culture, because what the high priests have always done is tell everybody else what to believe. If the high priests of Western culture get up and say that, that is going to be, a grenade under the tent. That is going to create a really big change, because now it's not just some goofy people saying stuff that nobody understands, but it's the scientists say that, yea, verily, this is a virtual reality, and if it's virtual, guess what? We're a subset of something non-physical that's more fundamental than us. Now, at this point, we have a couple of ways we could go. We could get into a big fight when this establishment, whatever that is, in religion and politics, whatever, tries to grab the power in the new situation. Whenever you have a big flux, a big paradigm shift, the people in power want to grab that and make it their own, right? So we're liable to have a back to the religious wars of my God's a better programmer than your God, to where there's this conflict going on with, religions want to own it, right? Okay, non-physical, yeah, that's my God has done all this. It's his simulation, and he's the best programmer. So you're liable to have that sort of stuff going on, or people with an attitude, well, if it's a virtual reality, then we can do anything. It doesn't matter, right? And of course, it's just the opposite. It does matter. It matters more because you're here trying to evolve. And if you do things poorly and make poor choices, you're just digging a hole for yourself to have to evolve out of. So it matters more than ever that we're in this virtual reality. So there's going to be a lot of stuff. There's going to be a lot of turmoil. Whenever you have a huge paradigm shift, there's turmoil. There's a lot of stuff going on, usually violence. The Industrial Revolution, right, where the people came in with their clubs and destroyed all the machinery because they didn't like the idea of machinery. So there's always going to be violence. There's always going to be some nutcases in the margins and other things that are going to stir up a lot of trouble. Well, if we can get through that, then I think we have a really good chance, because the next little piece of logic after consciousness is the computer, which is the only thing that makes sense, is that love is the answer. It's a logical derivation from there. And if enough people have that idea, if enough people kind of see that bigger picture, when we get to that point where the scientists say that, it'll be an easy transition. We'll just slide right into that. Yeah, right. Yeah, we better straighten up. We have a whole new attitude toward what our purpose is here and what we need to be doing. We need to straighten up, and that will be spread, like I say, over the internet to billions of people all at the same time. So no, I don't think this transition is going to happen in a week. From when the physicists declare this a virtual reality, it may be another 2 decades or so before all the turmoil and all the stuff that is going to settle down. But if there's enough of us that see a bigger picture, then we'll make this transition on the first try rather than have to regress for another, 50 years or 100 years and then come back at it again. We'll be able to do it on the first shot. So that's why I think the experiments are important, because if these experiments work the way I think, they will be a big kick in the pants to scientists to see that this is a virtual reality and admit that. Now, it's been around a long time. With the double slit experiment, goes back to the early 1900s. Those were done in like 1914 to 1925 or something. And they showed that this is not a materialistic reality, but physicists just chose to ignore it. They just decided, no, it's just weird science. We don't have to, we don't have to admit that this is not a materialistic world yet. Well, these ones I have are a little more dramatic. They're not just changing tiny things that nobody can see. Kind of the mysterious stuff that's kind of lost in the fog because it's in the micro world. They're changing big things that people can pick up in their hands. They're changing, the way pieces of plastic reflect or transmit light, that kind of thing. They're up in the macro world now, making macro miracles, not micro miracles, which will make a big difference. And it's not just me that's pushing this, but the science in general has been pushing physicists in that direction. A decade and a half ago, when I first published my books, me and maybe 3 other people on the planet thought virtual reality was a really good idea and good science. Everybody else thought it was crazy. Now, a decade and a half later, probably 20% of all the physicists in physics departments, particularly at the better universities, at the MITs and Caltechs, they think virtual reality is something we need to consider and think about. It's a real thing. I published these simulation hypothesis things in a peer-reviewed journal. Say, a decade ago, they would have been thrown out by the first person who looked at them as obvious trash. Now they get okayed as real research in a peer-reviewed journal. So physics has changed a whole lot. You got a lot of younger people in there, particularly at your higher level universities, who think this is right because it's the only thing that works. And the younger ones aren't quite as, tied up in the dogma that the older ones are. So we're on a verge now of this flipping anyway. And I'm hoping that my experiments are the thing that kind of knocks that big round boulder at the top of the hill, just bump it out of its divot to where it starts to roll. And if we can get that done, I think everything else will take care of itself. The only problem is, are we going to understand it and within some few decades find out that love is the answer, or is that going to take us another couple of centuries? That's more the question, and that just depends on what the population. How easily is the population going to be misled? my God's a better programmer than your God, and so you need to join my team, and that we need to get rid of that other team. We need another holy war to get rid of the people whose gods don't know how to program. So, we don't want to go there. So that's how the experiments fit in. I'm hoping that they're the fulcrum, they're the thing that kicks this thing off, because I think the only way it'll get out of the margins is if the high priests get behind it, because the high priests are mainstream. And if you don't get the blessing of the high priests in the mainstream, there'll be a small number of people who will go, that's the way the world works, but they'll just stay a small number of people and they'll never get out of the margin. So it's critical that the physicists get it. Now, the physicists don't see the bigger picture. They're not going to see this as getting that big rock out of its divot to start to roll downhill. They're only going to see this as, all right, it's a virtual reality, and that means, that it's computed and it has to be computed somewhere else. They'll get that much because that's just, third grade logic. They'll say that. They won't say anything else past that. They won't mention consciousness. They're not going to mention love is the answer. They don't have to. Once they get that genie out of the bag, that our reality is a subset of something else that's more fundamental and is non-physical, they can't stuff that genie back in the bag. There's a whole lot of other people who are not dedicated to materialism like they are that will understand what that means, and that ball will start to roll. And the physicists may go, wait, we didn't say that, we didn't mean that, but that ball is going to take off and is not going to be able to be pushed back up that hill. So we don't need the physicists to come on board to love is the answer. We only need them to say, yea, verily, this is a virtual reality. And even if they say no more than that, the rest is going to happen anyway, because it's not hard logic. It's the only thing that works. People are desperate for something that works, something that'll help us get out of this mess that we're in. And we've got the infrastructure to get out of the margins and into the mainstream here. So that's the way I see it going on. The physicists aren't going to launch this thing with a purpose to help save the world. They're going to launch it because they have to admit it, because it's better physics. That's all. That's why you need experiments.
The fact that you come to this place coming from love, so you have the philosophy, but you also have the hard science behind you, to me makes you like the perfect candidate to usher this in, if I can say it in those kinds of words. You are walking your talk. It's obvious that you are coming from a place of love. And the fact that you can explain and prove with your experiments, it just has to. It has to rocket forward. I doubt if it's going to take 20 years. If it's in our power to help encourage that, to make it go faster, we're on the team, all right?
Right. Yeah, more people on the team, the better it's going to work. Yeah, absolutely. That's why we did this round the world trip last year in 2017. We went to New Zealand and Australia and India and then Germany, and gave a talk, basically just what we talked about, that this is coming, that we need to be prepared, we need to have a bigger picture, and tell your friends, it was that sort of thing. And we did that going around the world. We found a lot of people who were really enthused about it. And we live in the age of YouTube. I've got 500 or so videos, on YouTube, enough to overwhelm anybody. And just hope that it spreads. And people like yourselves, I do talks like I'm talking with you. You heard me talk with from the Kickstarter with the guy from Rhine. I do that sort of thing 3 or 4 times a week. I do that, all the time. And there's literally hundreds of people who, just like you, want to help, want to be part of this process, want to help educate and let people see that bigger picture. So that's growing. That has to go viral. It can't be me. You know, Tom Campbell hollering with one voice, you know, in the woods is irrelevant. It won't make any difference whatsoever. It's got to be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people who actually make it happen. It can't be, you know, I can't make it happen, but I can try to help other people see it, and they'll work, and other people, and they'll work, and I think we've got a good shot at it. Now, again, it's if the experiments work. You know, I don't give that 100%, but I give it a pretty high probability because I've taken the virtual reality ideas, the same ones that explain consciousness, they explain quantum mechanics and they explain relativity without all the weirdness. They just explain it. And I've looked at all of the what do you call them, paradoxes in physics, and every one of them resolves into a logical answer if you see it from the viewpoint of virtual reality, if you see it from the same ideas that create the consciousness. And since I know that consciousness is fundamental and everything else is derived therefrom, it gives me some confidence, you know, that it'll work out. But you never know for sure because I have to make some guesses. The system, being I told you, digital reality is very flexible. There's always a dozen ways to work a problem. And I pick out the one that is the most efficient, the most parsimonious in computer terms. That is, it takes the least number of steps and the least amount of time. You know, it's the most efficient, the best programming. Because I figure the system's been around a really long time. It ought to be good by now. It shouldn't have a lot of crappy programming in it. You know, it ought to be very elegant and very parsimonious. So with that assumption, I can say, well, the system's if I do this, it'll react like that. And if that happens and I do this, it'll do that. I'm basing it all on my understanding of what the most parsimonious path is, that's the way the system will do it. And I can look at the way the system has reacted, say, with double slits and other things, and see how the choices it made there. But it can solve these problems in other ways. It doesn't have to solve them in the way that I solved them. Maybe I didn't see the most parsimonious path. You see, so I'm not 100% sure that they'll work, but I think they probably will. I think some of them, it's just any of them work, it'll be a grenade under the tent. You know, it's going to make a big deal. And I think they have a good chance of working. I don't find any particular flaws in them other than I know I don't know everything. And if you don't know everything, then you have to be skeptical of yourself that, you know, maybe there's things I don't know. But like any scientist, any experiments, you're going to win either way. You're going to win if they work, and you're going to win if they don't. If they work, well, the win's easy. If they don't, it means you got more work to do. You didn't understand something. You got something wrong. There's another way to look at the problem that you didn't see that's even more parsimonious than the way you looked at it. And perhaps that'll happen. But then I'll learn something. So I'm just excited to get the results because I'm going to learn something either way. So it's, for me,
live till you're 200 years old.
I may have
to be an excuse to live longer because you got to keep working on the project.
Yes, I think that might be the case. But anyway, it's exciting times, and I'm having fun, and I hope they work because that'll be the easy path. But if not, I'll learn things and I'll get better at figuring out how the system's going to react, because the system has to make very specific choices, because this is a hard physics problem. We're talking about stuff here. We're not talking about anything that is not objective. It's all an objective set of logic. And the system is going to have to produce an answer when we make the measurement. And it can come up with it in several ways. I think it'll come up with a way that will make these experiments work for me, but I could be wrong. But we'll see. And in any case, I'll learn a lot, and I'm not going to be an unhappy person either way. It's going to be good for me in both ways. One's just the easy, quick way, and the other is back to the drawing board's way. So whatever. It'll be whatever it is, and stuff happens, and I'll deal with it. So that's kind of my viewpoint. But it's good that we started off with such, the first 2 days. Now, not quite 2 days yet. In another hour, it'll be a day and a half. We did pretty well. We're not up to half yet, but we're getting close. That quickly gives me hope. because it's going to take more money than the 150 minimum to actually do it. But we didn't want to put any higher number there, because if you don't make your minimum, all the money goes back. You don't get to keep any of it. So you only get to keep it if you get above your minimum. So we put the lowest minimum that we could think of that would still allow us to do some of the experiments, probably some of the most important, most dramatic ones we do first, or the easiest ones we do first. So that would get a foot in the door. And if those work well, that will encourage more people to, want to do them in universities too. So that's the plan. We need the 150 just to get started in a way that'll work and give us some output. But if we get more, then we'll do all the experiments.
Do you think it's possible that if the initial experiments work out the way you hope and plan, that larger institutions, whether it be education or corporations, government, do you think that you would get, do you think there would be potential for funding from much bigger entities?
Yeah, some of the ones, particularly even some of the easy ones, if they work the way I say, that'll be fairly dramatic. And I would suspect that they'd get published in another physics paper, and we'd say, here, we did this experiment, and here were the results, and it would be a meaningful experiment. It would get peer reviewed, it would be published, and people would read it and say, no way, that couldn't possibly have happened. Let's go do that and see if we get that. And you're going to have lots of people repeating them, and of course, if everybody also gets the same answer, then you're in like Flynn. Anything else you want to do, you'll have physics department falling over each other trying to get you, to do it in their place, because whoever actually does this work is going to be rather famous. So then it'll be just the opposite. There'll be, lots of people will do it, which is why the 150 may work, may be just enough, to get that ball rolling, even if we can't do them all ourselves. It may make it legitimate in the eyes of science that we've done it. And after that, yes, there'll be all sorts of offers to do those experiments.
So that's why you couldn't involve intention in the experiments, because they have to be repeatable and provable by skeptics.
Absolutely. They just have to be a physical experiment, and it works that way because that's the way the physical world works. It can't have anything to do with intention or any consciousness connection to it at all. It's got to stand on its own as a physical experiment that'll always do the same thing, because that's just the nature of our reality. Otherwise, physics wouldn't deal with it. It'd be hocus pocus, and they wouldn't touch it or repeat it. But when they take it into their lab, they'll get the exact same result that we get. So, and when they do, then that just gives us credibility. You see, so that's the game, and we live in exciting times, right? We'll see what happens, and whether this actually works, or maybe we'll have to come back and do it again. I don't know, but I'm having fun playing the game anyway.
So, are you open to having more fun with us?
Of course.
So that's our show for today. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and watch for updates on our Facebook page.
ShiftHappens.Media.